The fortress stood silent in the frozen heart of France. The year was 1396. Its gray stone walls trapped the chill like a secret, and the wind hissed through the arrow slits as though mourning something yet to die. In a small echoing chamber, a young girl stood still as marble. Her attendants moved around her with the solemn rhythm of ceremony, preparing her for a night history would rather forget. Her name was Isabelle of Valois. If you are drawn to raw, unpolished history, consider subscribing and drop a comment telling us where you are watching from. She was 12. The women brushed her long, pale hair until it gleamed like glass under the quivering flames. Their low prayers merged into one continuous murmur, words she could barely hear over the hammering of her own heart. The linen shift they placed upon her was too heavy for her slight body, pressing down on her shoulders like an invisible crown. A faint perfume of lavender and candle wax clung to the veil lowered over her head. When they finished, she no longer resembled a child. She looked like a sacrifice. Outside, the winter wind clawed against the walls, desperate to break in. Within, the air itself thickened, heavy with dread and ritual. Down in the great hall, her husband waited. King Richard II of England. He was 29, already hollowed by loss. His first queen, Anne of Bohemia, had died young, and his grief had spread through the kingdom like ash. England had mourned with him. Its bells told not only for her death, but for the death of his youth. But kings are not permitted to mourn forever. Peace demanded more than sorrow could pay. So between England and France, a new accord was forged, not signed in ink, but sealed in flesh. This was no marriage of affection or will. It was an exchange, a living treaty, a child traded for a fragile peace. And to make that promise unbreakable, the union had to be witnessed, verified, and documented beyond doubt. Not for one night, but for 7. 7 nights of observation, intrusion, and what they called consummation. Not hidden in privacy, but displayed as ritual. This was no wedding night. It was sanctified captivity. The grim arithmetic of medieval politics. In medieval Europe, a young girl's body could become a legal document, and her suffering the proof that bound kingdoms together. Before entering the chamber where Isabelle's ordeal unfolded, one truth matters: every detail survives in real records, royal ledgers, medical notes, and clerical chronicles preserved for 6 centuries. These accounts were not written as metaphors. They were the precise, cold language of bureaucracy documenting what the era considered lawful procedure. For Isabelle, the ritual was known as the extended bedding, or the 7-day verification. In the medieval world, marriage among nobility had nothing to do with affection. It was a political weapon meant to forge alliances and secure heirs. But when the bride was too young to conceive, when her body might fail or rivals might question the union, the solution was to record its legitimacy by force. The marriage had to be proven, witnessed, and confirmed in writing. A noble bedding ceremony was already harsh by modern standards. Attendants escorted the couple to bed, undressed them before witnesses, and placed them under embroidered sheets while priests stood by chanting blessings. Outside, nobles listened for signs that the marriage had been consummated. But when a royal treaty depended on the bride, the ritual stretched far beyond a single night. It became a week of observation, intrusion, and complete loss of privacy. Physicians from the French court documented these events like scientific reports. Guards stood outside the chamber. Clergymen and nobles entered at scheduled hours to observe. Servants delivered food and linens. Twice a day, doctors inspected the couple to confirm the act had taken place, writing clinical, detached notes. They were not voyeurs. They were bureaucrats fulfilling a duty meant to protect the political agreement. Isabelle was the daughter of King Charles VI of France, remembered as Charles the Mad, and Queen Isabelle of Bavaria. Raised in ceremony and obedience, her life had always been intended as a bridge between kingdoms. When France and England sought to end decades of conflict, she became the price of peace. Richard II, nearly 30 and deep in grief for his first wife, hesitated at the idea of wedding a child, but the treaty demanded her hand. The wedding in November 1396 was lavish, celebrated with feasts, banners, and church bells. But when the celebration ended, the true ritual began. The chronicles fall nearly silent about what happened within the chamber. One French writer recorded a single sentence: "By royal command, the bedding was prolonged for a week to secure the alliance." Westminster Abbey's archives state plainly that physicians attended daily to confirm each act. These 7 days became the foundation on which two kingdoms declared peace, justified by medicine, law, and faith twisted together to rationalize the unthinkable. Testicartum, estulio, perfecto. It is testified, the union is complete. To the men who recorded those words, it was proof of divine order. To Isabelle, it was the breaking of everything she was. She lived in a world where others spoke languages she could not understand, deciding what her body must endure for peace. There was no romance for her, only repetition shaped as ceremony. The chamber smelled of incense and candle smoke. Priests murmured blessings outside the door. Guards shifted in the corridor, armor scraping with each movement, a constant reminder she could not escape. To her attendants, her tears were simply the fear of womanhood. When she trembled, physicians labeled it reaction. When she bled, they called it proof. This was not marriage. It was a siege, and her body the fortress taken in the name of order. French envoys at the English court wrote calmly to Paris. Their letters stated the marriage was properly concluded according to custom, that every measure had been observed. They never mentioned the child at its center. Diplomacy demanded silence. After 7 days, Isabelle emerged pale and unsteady. She had survived, though what part of her remained was unclear. Despite all rituals and examinations, she did not conceive. Her body was too young, too fragile. Physicians blamed timing and diet, never the act itself. When the week ended, the kingdoms announced the alliance secure. The world rejoiced. The girl at its heart was left with silence. Richard II's behavior afterward became quiet speculation. Some whispered guilt. Others said disgust. Whatever the reason, he withdrew from her almost completely. He granted her jewels, chambers, attendants, everything except affection. In public he was gentle, but he never summoned her again. Some chroniclers claimed he confessed remorse, others said it hardened him further. What remained certain was that they never had children. When Richard was deposed in 1399 by Henry Bolingbroke, Isabelle was barely 13. Richard died in captivity within a year, starved or quietly killed. Isabelle, now a widowed child, was ordered to remain in England. Her dowry and gifts became bargaining tools once more. But France demanded her return, arguing the treaty was void without a king. Negotiations dragged on, conducted by men who spoke of her as if she were property. In 1401, at 15, Isabelle was finally sent home. Records describe her return as silent, pale, her hands clasped as though still bound. She lived quietly with her mother, rarely appearing in public. Some said she slept with a candle burning, afraid of darkness and shut doors. At 16, she married Charles of Orleans, closer to her age. This ceremony was modest, free of guards and physicians. In this marriage she bore children and rediscovered small joys, though those who knew her said a quiet stillness remained. What had happened at 12 could never be undone. Her story survived in traces, treaty notes, letters, and the echo of a child turned into evidence. History often hides its darkest truths behind the language of ceremony, but when we remove the rituals and titles, we find a young girl whose life was shaped by forces far beyond her control. Isabelle of France became a political instrument long before she understood the meaning of power. Her marriage to Richard II was not built on affection or choice, but crafted as a treaty meant to secure a fragile peace between kingdoms willing to sacrifice a child for stability. The extended bedding ritual that followed exposed the harsh reality of medieval politics, where a girl's body became evidence and her silence a requirement. Records from the time describe inspections, observations, and clinical notes written by physicians who treated her not as a person but as a procedure, just another step in confirming political agreements. These documents, preserved for centuries, reveal how society justified cruelty by covering it with faith, duty, and law. Isabelle's own voice is absent from history, yet her presence echoes through the accounts left by others. She endured the ritual, survived the scrutiny, and carried the weight of expectations no child should face. Although she eventually remarried and found brief moments of peace, the scars of her early life remained with her. Isabelle's story is not unique, but it is a powerful reminder of the countless girls used as tools in political alliances. Through her, we see how innocence can be traded, sanctified, and quietly forgotten in the name of order.